So the application we're creating today is an analog clock. I have another video on my channel that walks through the process of making a clock hand in a more detailed and visual means. I suggest watching that before creating the analog clock because it really fully explains everything that's needed to create a clock hand and why it works, how it does. So to begin the application, I'm actually going to create a new view because I want to be able to call upon the clock hand multiple times depending on what second, hour, or minute that I'm using in the clock. So I'm going to create a SwiftUI view. Just simply call it clock hand. Now, because I don't want to create a hand just for the second and just for the minute, just for the hour, I want to create like a template clock hand. I need to use variables so I can actually determine how long I want each hand to be and the angle that each hand is going to be dependent upon the time. So to start with, I'm going to say let length be a CG float. Let the thickness of the hand also be a CG float. Let the color of the hand be a type color. And finally, the angle on the clock face will be a double. I'll get rid of the preview because we don't need that. And we can start our path. So a path is a simple path with a closure. And inside the closure it requires a variable, and I'm going to call it path as well. I need to determine now where I'd like it to start, but I don't have anywhere for it to go yet because the path doesn't have a frame. So I'm going to give it a space to work within. So imagine it like an imaginary box or container for our path to sit inside of. And because the line starts in the middle of my box and goes out to the edge of the circle, which is my clock face, I need the length of the line to be, the frame width to be double the length of the line. So I'll multiply each of those by 2. And I'm ready to start my path. So to begin, my path needs a place to start. So path.move. So move to the CG point within the frame. So the coordinate in the frame, where would I like that to move to? I'll move to whatever the length is of my line. So, typing's terrible. So because the length, let's say hypothetically was 80, the length of the line, the frame is going to be 160. Therefore, 80 is going to be halfway across my width and halfway down my height. From there, I'm going to move it to 12 o'clock, pointing towards 12 o'clock. Path.add line to the next CG point, which is the top of my frame. And 80 across. So 80 across the X, but don't move down. So I shouldn't use length, I should use 0. So we won't go down the screen at all. So again, we start at the middle, which is halfway across my length times 2, and halfway down my length times 2. So it's basically like a square with the starting point in the middle. Then I'm going to add a line from that point to my next point, which is 80 across and 0, which is the top of my frame. I now need to add some color. So dot stroke, so I can actually see my line. Color dot red. Oh no, sorry, take that back. I'd like to whatever color is typed in. So whatever I type into the clock hand initializer when I create my clock hand, that's going to be the color with a style of stroke style. And I don't need all these, but I'll take the line width. So that will be the thickness of my line. The cap's going to be rounded, so it's got a round end to both the start and end of the line. And I don't need any of this, so I'll get rid of it. Lastly, we're going to do a rotation of the line. I've made a mistake somewhere. Oh, of course, the stroke has to go first. Okay. Dot rotation effect, there we are. Angle, degrees, and whatever angle is typed in will be the rotation of that line. So let's just test out our new clock hand in our content view. And we'll go clock hand, and the length will be, let's say 100 with a thickness of 5, and we'll make it dot red with an angle of 0 to start with. And we'll have a look at what our line looks like inside our ancient iPod Touch. While that's thinking, we'll talk about the plan for the remainder of the app. So I'm obviously going to have 3 lines. There we go, a nice line there. So you can see here we've got a frame of 100 by 100. Sorry, 200 by 200, which is double the length. The line starts in the middle and goes to the top. So next, we're going to create our clock face. So let's start with a Z stack. So we'll layer all of these clock hands and the circle for the clock face on top of each other. And we'll start with circle dot frame with a width of, let's say 250, height of 250, and we'll throw a stroke. And again, we learned from before, it needs to come first. Stroke. And we'll just do this as color dot black. And a line width of, say, 2. Have a look, see what it looks like. Lovely. So now we've got our clock face. We have our angle for the clock hand of our second hand. And we'll just do a copy and paste and make the same for the second hand. Make the hour hand a little bit smaller and also black. Now, because we're in the same angle and we're in a Z stack, they're actually layered on top of each other, each of these views. So we'll start manipulating the angle of our clock just to see what it looks like. That's nice. There's our clock with our second hand facing up, minute hand and hour hand. I might even make that a little bit smaller. It's a little bit more noticeable, the difference. No, take that one back. Okay. So finally, to finish up our design, we need to actually place a time for the clock to represent. So at the top, at state var, current time is equal to date, and initialize that date as the current date and time. Due to a few extensions that I've just inputted earlier, these are now extending date, so we have the angle of the hour hand, the minute hand, and the second hand. So we'll use that current time and get the second angle for the current time. Then do the same for minute and hour hand angle. And it should give us the current time. Yep, sure does. It's getting late. It's just short of 11 o'clock. Which, according to this, yep, just short of 11 o'clock. So moving from here, we now need to make this clock live, so it changes as the application is running. So to do that, we'll add a timer, and we'll run the timer on appear. So when this Z stack appears on the screen, we're going to run the timer. We're going to run a schedule timer with a time interval of every 1 second. Yes, please do repeat, and every single second run this code. And again, here's our closure, and the closure this time is taking a variable which I've called timer. Oh, things are happening over here as the view's changing. And every 1 second, I'd like the current time to equal whatever the system time is. Again, initializing the time initializing the date, which has the current date and time inside of it, hopefully updating every 1 second. So we'll just hit play in our simulator. Sure enough, there it goes around, just hitting 11 o'clock and spinning nicely. Now, where we'll fall into a trouble will be when this line gets back up into our minute and hour hand. Now, traditionally, a second hand will go over top of the hour and minute. But based on our Z stack, the circle goes down first. On top of that will be the second hand, then the minute hand and the hour hand. Here it comes around. And sure enough, you can already see where the minute hand's going in behind and you can no longer see it, particularly once you hit the 12 o'clock. So we'd like that to go over top. So we'll take the red second hand and move it to the bottom of our Z stack, placing it on top of the other two views. You can already see down through here that that hand is now on top of the minute and the hour hand. And that's it. We have an analog clock.